Steins Gate is an anime that provides a lot of food for thought in its pseudoscience take on time travel. Not about the flow of time or technology, but about fate and the dangers of science. It's a quest of finding humanity in the most inhumane places. Those are topics I'll be covering one day, as well as the anime makes exceptionally fluent points on both subjects that deserve much more attention. But first, there's a matter more pressing. Both of these themes and nearly everything in the anime is viewed through a single lens. Okabe Rintaro. Well, I guess that makes it two lenses. Okabe Rintaro and Hououin Kyouma. Okabe is himself like many linear-based principles in science. The being of Okabe equals the mind of Okabe times the mind of Hououin Kyouma. If one factor grows larger, the other must recede, and if one recedes, the other must grow. A stasis maintained by the very laws of nature herself, yet applied to a man who shakes the term natural down to its very core. He's anything but, using a persona, a constant act, forcing deception over the ones he loves most at all times. His existence is one free of both nature and some of the very essence of humanity, shrinking more and more as he throws himself into the pits of hell to undo the harsh course he set the world upon, while only trying to better his friends' lives in the singular way he knew how. This is a deep dive into the murky depths that make up Okabe Rintaro and Hououin Kyouma. It's no secret that Kyouma is a crutch used by Okabe. He admits this a few times throughout the series, saying directly,
"I made this place because I couldn't invent friends."
to Kurisu in episode 10 and
Hououin Kyouma? Who gives a damn about him? He's fiction.
in episode 21. He makes the game obvious for her specifically many times. But why does he do it? Initially it's for Mayuri, but that moment doesn't stand alone. It's the culmination of everything in his life before that, sparked by an instant of desperation and despair. Mayuri, for the longest time, had to be Okabe's only friend. When the future Gadget Lab begins, we know it only has two members, the both of them. And then it stayed that way for a while before Daru joined, as the two sat for hours near to each other, but always far apart nonetheless. It's also made clear that his obsession with time travel reaches back a ways as well. When John Titor pops up once again, Okabe mentions how he was popular in the year 2000, saying directly,
No way! 10 years ago, every chode with a .com address was on top of this thing.
Now, Steins Gate is set in 2010. We see the year many times, and we know that Okabe is 18 during the anime. So Okabe was about 8 when John Titor first appeared, and we can assume based on his comments he was enamored by the idea back then, as he is now. This means for his most socially developmental years, he was a nerd in a somewhat traditional sense. He was likely a very socially awkward child, one we established was alone, and one who probably felt quite pointless. But he always had Mayuri, someone with exactly what he lacked, that sense of togetherness and, in a way, humanity. Someone who would always stand by his side, until it looks like she might not. Reaching for the sky as if to welcome the fate that awaits every human, early and with open arms and acceptance. In that moment where it looks like he may lose her, as she has just lost, Hououin Kyouma is born. A mad scientist who would take her hostage forever, so she could never leave, not in choice and not in death. Because a mad scientist doesn't just accept fate, they fight it and change it. A purpose unlike any other, a purpose that's only false utility. Kyouma is Okabe's crutch for this utility alone, the service it provides him and the paradoxical closeness through distance it allows with his friends. A way to communicate and interact, a way to avoid fate in the future, and a way to finally grab purpose. This is more than just conjecture or assumption based on a single moment. Knowing it's all an act, and working from what we assumed from his past, we can draw these conclusions. Start with it as a way to interact and make friends. If he knew what to say or do, knew how to interact with someone else, or save them even, then this wouldn't be how he chose to keep Mayuri. And this isn't the only deep moment that Okabe pawns off to Kyouma. We see this any number of times, from the laundromat with Kurisu, as he shows an understanding glance before receding, the stares with Suzuha, where he dives into it full force to help her, or every time he has to save Mayuri, confronting her with his usual self. He never explains the situations to her outright. He also leans into it when he meets someone new, as he does with Suzuha, Moaka, and Kurisu.
Be warned, girl. Many a passing acquaintance of mine has been hounded by the organization.
What is the organization playing at?
I'm sorry?
But you're mistaken if you think I'll sell out a cohort. I'll give you my contact info.
He doesn't know how to communicate outside of this persona, where everything can be phrased and worked exactly as it needs to be. What he says doesn't need to make sense because everyone knows he speaks nonsense. There's no need to fit it to the situation, to tailor it to the people he's talking to, just to speak it as Hououin Kyouma. That's just who he is. And with that, he escapes the fear and effort of connecting effectively with those around him. And as an outsider, it offers him an excuse for why he's scoffed off or lacking in friends at times. If he was going to be discarded by the majority of society anyway, then why not lean into it, act it all up, and put a real reason to it all? It's not like they dislike him, it's Kyouma, the mad scientist, who they dislike. Although not directly, Mayuri accepting fate in that graveyard is also a rejection of Rintaro. He's not enough to keep her in this world. So not only does he become a personality so big it could never not be enough, but he also creates a shield so he can never feel that again. That being the rejection, indirect or not, that she was about to choose. Okabe is Kyouma so he can communicate, so he has an excuse not to, and so it's always his desire. In the same way, he doesn't know how to express feelings to anyone else. If he couldn't even take accidental rejection, then how would he manage it directly? Again, saving Mayuri in this manner makes it obvious, but he uses it almost every time a heartstring gets pulled. He never tells them about his time leaps unless it's the most dire situation, unless he has to. He never allows himself to do anything to hurt them, even at the cost of his own humanity, over and over and over again. Until the hand of fate decrees he inflict harm, he never will. But Kyouma, he can express these things, or at least goals that run parallel. He's not helping them, but foiling an organization plot that just so happens to be exactly what they need. Or he's not helping them, but fixing their issues so they can be an effective lab member. Even small things like giving Ferris and Ruka confidence boosts as a master. He has pure and amazing intentions, but no way to take them and let others know directly. Where someone else may just say, "You look amazing," he says,
Code Red! The organization's attacking me with mind-blowingly adorable cosplay!
It's roundabout, where there's always an abstraction from reality and plausible deniability. That wasn't a compliment, that was just the truth of the situation that no one else saw. Every single action he takes throughout the anime is for the betterment of someone else, at least partially. Even directly harming Moaka because the changes in the past keep her alive. He's very discernibly selfless outside of the harsh front he puts on. Yet he never asks if they need help or if they want help. He just leaps right into action. An excuse to help that ensures they could never say no, and no matter the outcome, he can persist in stagnation. Okabe is Kyouma so he can help those around him. I say persist in stagnation because that's one word to describe how Okabe acts. Childish. When he calls out Kurisu for childish tactics and her retort is to say this,
Why hello, Kettle, my name is Pot. Anyway.
It's rooted in obvious truth. Steins Gate is good at dual utility moments, where these jokes also further the character's depth. He's doing something a younger version of himself would have at least been interested in, but it's more self-serving than that. It may seem tough to keep a mask on at all times, and it is. It's torture to act like something that you're not, whatever the reason. But rejecting rejection in this way he does is very juvenile. It's a way of saying, "I didn't like you anyway," preemptively. He's assisting others at all costs, but again, he never asks if they want his help, he simply does it. He doesn't know how to express the want to help, but to say his desires are so simple is an insult to a beautiful act. Taking Mayuri hostage is something that, although it isn't entirely, could be against her will. It's not her choice to leave anymore. When he does things like this, and the way his personality takes over rooms, conversations, almost everything, it's an interjection of his own desire into every moment of his life. He helps, but why? Out of pure moral ideals of what he should do as a human? Or because people you help are less likely to leave? They have more strings tied to you. More moments that make it impossible to leave. More world lines where you have crossed. It makes it harder to leave, like being a hostage. Okabe is Kyouma because Okabe is childish and to a degree selfish. Now that's where a fake persona makes sense, but what about a mad scientist specifically? Why choose that? Well, there's an ever-relevant detail as well. One of the beauties of science is everything either has or will have a solution. Equations balance, systems equalize, and so on. If you have 100 kilograms moving with an acceleration of 5 meters per second, you have 500 newtons of force. That's a law of the world and it can't be changed. Everything can be solved. As a mad scientist, when Kyouma offers help to someone, it comes in the form of some sort of problem to be solved. Kurisu needs to see her father, so he'll take her to him, simple enough. Suzuha needs to find her father, so he'll work through the steps, find the pin, and track him down. Ferris, Ruka, and Moeka could improve their lives with D-mails, so he has them send D-mails. Cause and effect under a different name is all this is. There's simple things too, like acting possessed and training Ruka, or being Ferris's master in some sort of magic. Those are completely non-scientific things. Why does a mad scientist perform these acts? All they could be is utility, a way to express some sort of appreciation to the targets of those very actions. And they're also a cheap and easy way to interact, like the whole persona itself. Just jump into the possession routine and the conversation gets a lot easier. It's like a repeatable experiment. He may not understand people. He may not understand their problems. But he understands the scientific method. A certain action getting a certain reaction. Every problem having a solution. Even if we don't understand it now, we will in the future. People are complex, but so are equations. Simplify, reduce, and you reach a conclusion mandated by nature herself. Or so it seems. Although he tries to help in this logical and concrete way, it either fails or has to be undone. He's attempting to square peg into a round hole. Maybe one day we will understand the exact workings of the brain and we can solve every human issue through chemistry and physics alone. But we have to accept reason, the knowledge that taking millions of years to solve a problem isn't necessarily a solution. At least so far. But methodology and rigidity is what he knows, the way he can express and the way things do work. Fate and science intersecting though, like they do for him, is a story and a video for another day. For now, we just know that Okabe is Kyouma because scientists have solutions to problems and his friends have problems. His mad flip side is more than just utility for those around him though. It does something else very important for him. It's a very clear and technically definable purpose in life. He's a mad scientist. There's no question what he's doing in life, even if it doesn't seem legitimate or real. It means nothing, but it has a boisterous appearance to it. And it does mean absolutely nothing. It's like the naming of their gadgets, random numbers and letters and phrases that look like something of value for anyone on the outside, but internally they're, well, nothing. Just hollow. And the gadgets themselves are a good example as well. Humidifiers shaped like mines because why not scare the shit out of people and keep it humid? A microwave you can use with your phone even though you'd have to be home to put the food in and eat it anyway, or a lightsaber full of fake blood because Star Wars maybe? There's no rhyme or reason and point to these items. They're inventions for invention's sake. Like a mad scientist for mad science's sake. It's also of note that when major discoveries happen with the phone wave, it's often followed by nothing, or a long pause in activity, or the Ferris Cup. Daru sleeping so they can't do any more. Kurisu leaving because she's scared so nothing happens for a bit. Or they just do the same thing over and over again, content to stop at any time. They even say,
"By the time you and me figure it out, we're gonna have flying cars and junk."
when something major happens, it's met with shock before anything else, and in fact, it's more like terror. The look as if the world is closing in around him, because in many ways, validity to this false part of his life is very much the end of the world. It's the end of his world, the end of Kyouma's world. So there's no urgency to what they're working on. The phone wave is innovation for innovation's sake, nothing more. Not only do they not understand it, but it's also not the point. The point is that purpose, the ability to do nothing but look and feel like you're doing anything. Okabe is Kyouma, so he can have a purpose no matter how false. And something of note about his purpose is that it could never come to fruition, at least within reason when he decided on it. Say I make my purpose to educate those around me. I go through school, get a job in a school, and start to teach the generations to follow me. You could say my purpose came to be and my goal was fulfilled, as if fate was upon me and had treated me well. This would never happen if I decided I would become a mad scientist who wanted to overthrow the organization and invent time travel. It's so ridiculous that even with every effort, I would never reach it. I think this avoidance of fate is in part of his choice in that moment. He never has to grow up, get a job, move out, marry, anything like that, any of the traditional factors of success. Instead, he can mess around with microwaves and alpaca men all day and be just as satisfied. In a paradoxical way, the false sense of purpose also means he never has to serve a purpose. He never has to define himself to any standard. Kyouma is very much an island. It's a very static and childish mindset. Everything against him can simply be thrown as evidence of the organization. A job or school, now that would just be ridiculous. There's no time and no need. He has bigger fish to fry. The organization is afoot with their plots and schemes. Yet at the end of the day and deep down, it means nothing at all. It's just an excuse. An excuse to keep his friends. An excuse to never grow up. Because growing up means losing those friends. We all grow old, apart, and eventually never grow again. And this is the last thing Okabe could stomach. He's a man who would willingly relive hell again and again and again and again if it means his friends would be okay. He's a man who would butterfly affect the world into doomsday for a simple text that might make someone's life better. They consider that butterfly effect, but only once it's too late, and then it never stops them. A man obsessed with time travel would never ignore this fact. But a man who was more scared of losing his friends, the one thing he has, the one thing that accepts him, is a man who would. To say he would develop a mindset that allows him to think he could keep them forever is an understatement, and that's the exact sort of thing a mad scientist would do. They are his life, and he gives his persona over to them for them. Okabe is Kyouma because Kyouma will never grow up. He'll never lose or be lost. It's also important that he drags them into this somewhat as well, into his persona. He abstracts those around him out of reality and into his own. Newcomers are probably organization spies.
They've probably taught you 20 ways to kill a man. Can you blame me for not jumping headlong into oblivion?
Or when someone else acts like he does, it's worthy of praise.
That sharp tongue of yours whetted on his blunt head, and I'm certain you'll rise through the ranks of your battalion in...
Or making them all join his future gadget lab.
As of this moment, I christen you lab member 005.
When they do something he can't understand or express an emotion that he can't help them solve, he makes a story to go with it. Because science has an answer, and so a scientist must. He has to understand them, and by bringing them into his reality and making their stories something of his own, he's able to do just that.
Why won't you speak? The aura of big bad legendary mad scientist Hououin Kyouma robs yet another innocent lamb of her powers of speech.
Take Mayuri and her captive status under him. It doesn't just keep her by his side, but it also lets him understand why she is. Because she has to be. It's simple and digestible, not complex like real human motivation and feeling. These things are often viewed as matters outside of science, against fact and reason. So bring them out of it. Bring them forcibly into your understanding. The world in his head is deep and twisting in its conspiracy, but bare and flat in terms of people and their whys. At its simplest, that's why he has a false name and calls them all by abstracted terms and labels as well. Shining Finger, Christina, Daru, and so on. They're not Moeka, Kurisu, and Itaru. Not unless his world is cracking around him like it does halfway through the anime. And when he has it his way, they're people who look the same, act the same, talk the same, but aren't quite the same. It's also likely why he insists they call him Kyouma and not Okabe. He needs some help in keeping up the illusion as well, and that goes a long way. It adds validity to the mad scientist and takes it away from the man who can lose and feel. Okabe is Kyouma because Kyouma can avoid fate and understand the people around him. What's almost funny about him using science as an excuse in all these ways is he's generally a terrible scientist. I think it's obvious he's intelligent and true as well, but in such a scattered and confusing way. It's a jack of all trades deal. He's involved in every situation and often sparks something in the others, but in actual advancements, he's never the one pulling the trigger. Kurisu designs the final phone wave and Daru builds it, later going on to fix the future time machine as well. He has to have the LHC explained to him and offers the idea to hack into CERN, but doesn't actually take part in the act. Oftentimes, he's just on fetch quests gathering parts for everyone else, and when he does do something, it's just a simple accident or convenient timing. The most he puts into something directly is researching John Titor. And this is just a continuation of one of his childhood interests, which by all standards in the early episodes would seem like a waste of time. But he's more obsessed with the idea of the scientist than in really being one. Not just searching for Titor, but his bombastic embrace of the lab coat, saying things to Kurisu like,
The sight of you enveloped in that lab coat, to the very marrow it thrills me.
The way he views soda as some sort of magic elixir for the scientific spirit, and his focus consistently shifting after major discoveries. On the downswing of their most successful moments yet, this is what he's thinking about.
I know, right? Probably some physical law. Wait, that would mean that my head is full of air.
If he never said that it was all an act, we'd be able to tell anyway. The same way everyone around him knows. Daru puts up with his weird lingo and demands, something the man wouldn't do if it wasn't his friend's true intention. Mayuri tells him straight,
It's okay. Just be yourself.
Kurisu sees him in his most human and weakest moments, and so on. It's no secret what's going on, they all call it out. Yet he maintains it anyway. And this fits with him being a terrible scientist on his own. Although he never directly makes the advancements, they all depend on him. None of it would have happened without his somewhat mad rantings and whims. And similarly, almost none of this ragtag band of friends ever would have met. They would have just continued on like ships passing in the night. Whether it's technology or humanity, Okabe has to keep Kyouma because Kyouma is the leader of the group, the glue that holds them together. He must feel a sense of responsibility stemming from the very first moment of necessity. He gave Mayuri an excuse to live and one he had to keep up with. He provides an outlet for Ferris's very own persona. He gave Daru a reason to use his skills, same with Kurisu. He gave Ruka a reason to love, no matter how unrequited, and Suzuha a figure to follow in many ways. And even while dark, he becomes the nucleus of Moeka's purpose. Hououin Kyouma is a necessity in this world, or at least he feels like one. He was the beginning, and Okabe hopes he'll always be that, tempting fate to avoid the end. It seems unreasonable to think they would abandon him if he let himself live as just that, himself. Given they all know his game, and it's often part of why they love him, he could drop it at any time and it wouldn't change much. But what if it did? What if he discarded his alter ego and everyone left? Or they slowly grew apart? What if the fate he so desperately crafted against finally took its toll, and then it was all for nothing? Kyouma's life would have been pointless. As someone who never had anyone and fought so desperately to get what he has, he could never take that chance. He may say that,
Come on, fortune favors the bold.
but he's only bold once he has to be. When the purpose he set himself, a mad scientist eager to time travel, somehow against all odds became true, and the only way was forward, down the path that was never meant to be. If he gave up then, if he gave up now, then it would be the same as admitting to the world Kyouma was fake and pointless and lived for nothing. Okabe is Kyouma because Kyouma is the glue that holds them and his life together. Now everything changes in episode 12. When fate comes for Mayuri and he begins his endless time leaps, Kyouma mostly drops off the map, only coming back at various points when it's convenient. Maybe this adds some validity to his fears given he's less Kyouma and Mayuri feels further from him than ever before. But when push comes to shove, he does what he needs to do. Hououin Kyouma is a man of avoidance, one who isn't destined for serious pursuits. Okabe Rintaro is the opposite, the man behind the curtain making the act work by willpower, smoke, and mirrors. So when the fate needs to be fought, he allows Okabe to take the driver's seat. It makes the act all the more obvious, seeing it so little and so overt when it does present. This moment right here, this is the most heart-wrenching of the entire anime. Watching him lean back into his game of friend preservation, knowing that he lost so much more than that, someone who meant more to him than he'd ever known before, it's unimaginable. He learned to love, learned to be genuine for those weeks of hell, and it's all forgotten. Dust swept up in a wind that never existed in the first place. The repeated time leaps are due to scientific advancement, but become anything but science. They're pure, emotional pockets of humanity desperately struggling to survive. Hououin Kyouma has no purpose in these moments far outside of his field, and so he can be dropped here because no one will remember. No one will know that he was just Okabe. No one will know he was genuine, that he helped them and cared for them and expressed this and loved them. Knowing that it will be undone is the only time he can say, I love you. The only thing rejecting him here is fate and time. The only place he's an outsider here is in his own head with his own memories of what will never be. These moments of hell are also some sort of levity. One weight off the shoulders replaced with another even heavier. Only this time it's carried by Okabe and not by Kyouma. Until everything changes again and he gets his shot at redemption from himself. What's telling to me here though is that future Okabe is a familiar figure but one with a different feel. That of a mad scientist full of love for humanity. That of a man genuine to himself, speaking with confidence and trust for his past self. Someone who's not playing around but also keeps things light somehow, more adult in many ways. And we watch present Okabe become this man. In the final episode, he's very much this mixture. Nowhere does this show better than the anime's final moments as he meets Kurisu once again. The first thing he does is fake a call like he used to, but in a much different tone. One that doesn't take Kyouma too seriously, but gives him an excuse to fulfill his goal. the framing of Kyouma, but the softer voice of Okabe, open and clear about his humanity and his love. That gentle smile acknowledging his past self and moving to his future one. No longer running from fate and paying the cost of doing so, but moving forward into it, shaping it as he sees fit. He wasn't lying when he said,
Luckily, I don't leave things to fate anymore.
this is the genesis of Okabe, where his two selves meld into the one we see in that video. This doesn't happen in a single moment, but slowly as he undoes the D-mails for his friends. Undoing Suzuha's, he sees that you can't always help through science and effort alone. Some things are bigger than one man could ever fix, or simply aren't meant to be fixed. Sometimes it's just work against your own goals to try so hard. Undoing Ferris's, he sees that nothing is worth more than a real family, that sometimes you can't take away others' pain, and other times that pain will always be theirs to hold. Undoing Ruka presents him with a crisis of identity, not wanting to rip someone away, and also forcing him to see that yes, some people do love Kyouma, but not just Kyouma. That maybe there's a balance there, maybe there's some truth to being what you feel you need to be. And undoing Moeka's is the first time he has to actively take from someone, forcefully and directly, the acknowledgement that sometimes goodwill isn't enough. To live so ideally, things have to be sacrificed. Pain can't be avoided forever. In a sense, they're all trials of pure humanity and emotion. He has to learn what it's like to not avoid these difficult moments anymore and pay the price of changing the world to do so. All the pain he avoids or helps to avoid comes back and makes him play ball. You can only avoid fate and pain for so long. Another note presenting clear and obvious that fate will have its way, whatever his wishes may be. He can shift it, make small changes that butterfly into something grand, taking that very effect into his own hands for his own power, but the most he can do is live with what he has in that way. Use that to better it and nurture it. And in the end, that was always his goal. They become something new together. Them being Okabe and Kyouma, and then him and his friends. Okabe keeps Kyouma because Kyouma is the reminder of his humanity, his past, present, and past, future, of his love and the love for him. A reference for genuine connection and an excuse to start it. Because Okabe is Kyouma and Kyouma is Okabe. Now, it's obvious that most things in anime need to be taken with a grain of salt. The situations are exaggerated and idealized. The framing of Steins Gate is a near complete impossibility for humans to ever experience. I'll never say impossible, but limited time often creates near impossibilities. However, narrative, even in exaggerated or unreal framing, can contain some of the most human elements, usually presented in a matching extreme, which gives us the ability to think and reflect on the very fundamentals of what it means to be human, right and wrong, or just ourselves. After finishing Steins Gate, I laid on my floor right here and experienced the silence around me for as long as I could until responsibility called me back to the real world. Because Okabe is one of the most real characters that I've ever related to. I usually harp on about philosophy and abstract concepts in my videos, and I am obsessed with those concepts. My framing of the world often feels foreign for others, and I have people tell me they don't understand what I mean a lot of the time. It feels like I'm a different species at times, unable to take what's in my head and important to me and express it to someone right next to me. So I say it jokingly or exaggerated in some false prose, so at least it gets a laugh and acknowledgement or even a weird look. I don't understand what to do otherwise, so once it started working, I kept it up. And that makes me worry that they don't understand how much they can mean to me. I always feel like the only way I can be something to them is to be the wild side of myself. I want to show people that I care, but I don't know how. How are people supposed to quantify something so abstract like caring? How am I supposed to express something I can hardly understand? I think that maybe one day I'll lose them and be stuck with holes in my heart that could never be filled. The kind we all end up with or become the stuff of for others eventually. Fate takes all of us away, and I wish there was any way to fight against it, even if it meant personal hell. I let myself feel the silence after Steins Gate closed because I understood Okabe. The ideas for this video were the most natural writing has ever felt for me. The words came out as if I had written them when it was just the actions of Okabe. I started jokingly talking about working through my issues with anime, and it's only half a joke. Psychopaths makes me feel not alone in recognizing the flaws I feel in society. Madoka Magica makes me feel okay with understanding pain differently. Trigun makes me feel okay with growing more warm and idealistic even when it hurts. Steins Gate makes it feel like my fears aren't mine alone. Okabe makes me feel like playing the villain isn't so bad, that the extraneous words adorning my speech are more than empty prose, they're a call to the world. A call to others who want to understand. That I'm not just alone in my own head, that my existence and the purpose I choose is valid. That's why I love talking about narrative and why I express it for you as well. To entertain when you're bored or distract when life is just shit. To educate, even if it's just for small bits under the veil of anime, and to let you know that you have someone like you. Whether it's me ranting about the abstract or others who enjoy the same show for its intense and wild action. This is off the rails from Okabe, but it's something I've been wanting to express for a long while. I've used YouTube for years for all of these things. I want to pay that back for how much it's helped me. So thank you for watching, for sticking around, for being here and letting me and others know that we are us, and us is a perfectly okay place to be. That was wild. I mean, that was scripted, but whew. That was a lot to say at once, and I wish I could have said it better. I'll probably never have the words to say it better.